Hey everyone, so grab a comfy seat, maybe a cup of coffee, because today I want to tell you about a book that really changed how I see the world, and honestly, how I understand myself and the people around me. It's called Running on Empty: Overcome Your Childhood Emotional Neglect by Dr. Jonas Webb, and let me tell you, it's a terrific, eye-opening, and potentially life-changing read. Now, before you think this is some heavy academic tone, it's anything but. Dr. Webb writes in such a rich, warm, and empathetic voice, it feels like she's talking directly to you, guiding you through what can often feel like a confusing maze inside your head. She doesn't focus on the big dramatic or traumatic things that did happen in your childhood. No, this book is about something far more subtle, something we rarely even think about: what didn't happen in your childhood. What wasn't there that should have been? Think about it this way: when we recall our childhoods, we usually remember the big events, good or bad, right? Family vacations, school plays, maybe a difficult move or arguments. But Dr. Webb shines a light on an invisible force. She actually names it emotional neglect, and how its absence has as much, or even more, power over who you've become as an adult than any of those memorable events. It's not physical neglect, mind you. Many people she writes for came from seemingly ideal families, receiving excellent physical care. The core idea is that even with loving, well-meaning parents, as they fail to notice, respond to, or validate your emotions consistently, that omission can leave you feeling running on empty as an adult. So you might be wondering, what exactly is emotional neglect? This invisible force? Well, according to Dr. Webb, it's when your parents give little attention or respect to your emotional needs, or disregard them, often through carelessness. It's not about what was said or observed, but what wasn't said or observed or remembered. For example, parents might provide a beautiful home and plenty of food, but fail to notice their teens' drug use, or give them too much freedom instead of setting needed limits. Later, that adult might blame themselves for their choices, thinking they had an ideal childhood with no excuse for their struggles, unaware that emotional neglect was silently at play. This idea immediately impacted other psychologists, who noted its crystal clear conceptualization and the tools Dr. Webb provides to identify and stop it. Dr. Webb introduces us to this concept by first exploring what good enough parenting looks like. Drawing on the work of child psychiatrist Donald Winnicott, it's about parents meeting a child's emotional and physical needs adequately, ensuring they grow into emotionally healthy adults. Most parents are good enough because humans are wired to help their children thrive. But life circumstances or parents' own issues can interfere. She then delves into 12 ways parents can inadvertently cause emotional neglect, and it's fascinating because you'll likely see bits and pieces of your own experience or recognize people you know. There's the narcissistic parent who sees their child as an extension of themselves, demanding perfection and taking the child's mistakes personally. Remembers it, whose mother focused on her own embarrassment after he severely injured someone, sending him to his room instead of comforting him. Or Beatrice, whose mother was thrilled by her daughter's scholarship to a prestigious school, but completely dismissed Beatrice's misery, accusing her of being selfish when she wanted to leave. These parents lack empathy and can create conditional love. Then we have the authoritarian parent, who is rule-bound and punitive, often equating a child's obedience with love. Sophia's father, for instance, became enraged when she wanted to spend Christmas Eve with her boyfriend's family, seeing it as a personal disrespect rather than her healthy need to build her own life. These kids learn to put their own needs aside. On the flip side, there's the permissive parent with their "don't worry, be happy" motto, who avoids conflict and fails to provide limits or structure. Samantha, who was the envy of the neighborhood with complete freedom, grew up underachieving and blaming herself because her parents didn't prepare her for the real world's demands. Audrey, whose parents were too preoccupied to notice her destructive behavior, also blamed herself for her struggles. These kids don't get enough feedback and are left to figure things out alone. The bereaved parent is often overwhelmed by their own grief, like Sally's mother, who, after her husband's death, couldn't communicate with her children about the loss. leaving Sally with deep-seated sadness and emptiness. Addicted parents, even functional ones, create unpredictability because they behave like two people, kind when sober, but mean or selfish when under the influence of their addiction. Richard, whose respected fire chief father made a mortifying scene at his baseball banquet after a few beers, leading Richard to quit baseball and later experience panic attacks, is a poignant example. The depressed parent has little energy, is often missing in action, and can inadvertently burden their child, like Zeke's father, who in his depression made Zeke feel his own poor behavior was making his dad sad. Workaholic parents are often admired, but their obsession with work conveys to children that their feelings are less important, leading to low self-worth, like Sam, who became depressed in college, blaming himself for his struggles, unaware of the invisible loss of his parents to their careers. Parents with a special needs family member are doing their best, but the sheer demands of caregiving can lead to the healthy child feeling guilty for having their own needs, like Stuart, whose parents minimized his struggles because their focus was entirely on his ill brother. The achievement perfection-focused parent is rarely satisfied, pressuring children to achieve the parent's desires, not the child's, leading to a squelching of the child's own needs and feelings. Tim, who was dragged to therapy by his wife, illustrates how this leads to perfectionism, self-judgment, and difficulty with emotional connection as an adult. Then there's the chilly sociopathic parent, who, lacking a conscience or empathy, uses control, manipulation, and blame, even hurting their children to get their way, like Wallace's mother, who punished him by giving his children cheap toys compared to their cousins, all to express her disappointment in his lack of visits. The childless parent scenario rises when a child is forced into adult responsibilities due to family hardship, like Zeke, who had to care for his younger sister, missing out on childhood lessons. And finally, the largest category, the well-meaning but neglected themselves women parent. These are genuinely loving parents who simply don't know how to provide emotional atonement because they never received it themselves. It's a self-propagating cycle. Dr. Webb really drives home that emotional neglect is about omission. What didn't happen, not commission. What did happen? That's why it's so hard to pinpoint and why many people blame themselves. So what happens when you're an adult who grew up emotionally neglected? Dr. Webb outlines 10 common characteristics, and many of these resonated deeply with me. 1. Feelings of emptiness, that chronic nameless discomfort, a sense of being on the outside looking in, even questioning the meaning of life. Simon, who used skydiving and racing Porsches to fight off his emptiness, even fantasizing about his parachute not opening, is a powerful example. 2. Counterdependence, a fierce drive to meet no one, a fear of relying on others, even at great personal cost. David, who grew up raising himself and internalized "don't ask, don't tell," struggled with emotional connection and had fantasies of living alone on a deserted island. 3. Unrealistic self-appraisal, not having a clear balanced sense of your own strengths and weaknesses because your parents didn't reflect them back to you. Josh, who was constantly moved between schools to avoid bullying and whose mother was too career-focused to truly see him, struggled his whole life to identify his talents or choose a career. 4. No compassion for self, plenty for others, being incredibly forgiving of others, but ruthlessly critical of yourself. Noelle, who had advanced degrees and a successful career, constantly castigated herself for minor flaws, having learned to be her own harsh parent because her mother, dealing with her own trauma, was emotionally absent. 5. Guilt and shame, feeling that something is fundamentally wrong with you, especially for having emotions. Laura, whose mother dismissed her grief after a friend's suicide, learned to push down all feelings, leading to inexplicable sadness and self-blame. 6. Self-directed anger, self-blame, the shame turning into intense anger at oneself, sometimes manifesting in self-destructive ways. Laura, again, who used beer and cutting to release her suppressed emotions, felt intense self-hatred for simply having feelings. 7. The fatal flaw's secret, carefully guarded belief that if people really know me, they won't like me. Carrie, whose parents treated her and her sister as interchangeable, struggled with the belief that she was unlikable and dumb, leading her to avoid social interactions and meaningful connections. 8. Difficulty nurturing self and others, struggling to provide emotional care because you didn't receive enough of it. David, who offered rational advice without emotion, couldn't truly connect because his emotional self had hardened from a lack of nurturing. 9. Poor self-discipline, trouble making yourself do things you don't want to do, or stopping yourself from doing things you shouldn't. William, who had a loving but unstructured childhood, struggled with procrastination and erratic habits, not having internalized the ability to self-regulate. 10. Alex City hates a deficiency in awareness and understanding of emotions, both your own and others. Cal, who literally couldn't identify his own feelings beyond anger and irritability, struggled with all relationships, his emotions festering inside until they erupted as rage or a plan for suicide. And speaking of suicide, Dr. Webb dedicates a whole chapter to the special problem of suicidal feelings. Especially when there's no obvious dramatic event or illness, she explains that for emotionally neglected people, these thoughts often stem from a profound emptiness or numbness, a quiet desperation where they feel disconnected, alone, and question the point of living. It's not feeling too much, but feeling nothing, and the fantasy of death becomes a twisted form of self-soothing. Robin's story is heartbreaking but illustrative. Outwardly successful and loved, she impulsively overdosed after a seemingly innocuous TV show triggered deep-seated shame and emptiness that she'd hidden even from herself since childhood. So, what's the good news? Can you fill the tank once it's been running on empty? Absolutely. Dr. Webb offers concrete solutions and a path forward. She emphasizes that change isn't linear, it's 2 steps forward, 1 step back, and setbacks aren't failures. Persistence is key. A huge part of the healing process involves learning about and valuing your emotions. She explains that emotions aren't a nuisance, they're essential for survival and for connecting with others, giving life depth and richness. For every emotion, there's a purpose. The first step is to identify and name your feelings. She offers an identifying and naming exercise and a feeling sheet to help you practice tuning inward. Then, it's crucial to accept and trust your feelings. There are no bad emotions, it's what you do with them that matters. Feelings may not always be rational, but they always exist for a good reason, and while powerful, they can be managed. She introduces the arrow steps: identify, accept, attribute, discern the reason, and act appropriately. Express. Learning to express your feelings effectively, assertively, and with compassion is also vital. This means not bottling things up, but communicating them so others can understand. This applies to friendships and marriage too. Many people who are emotionally neglected believe sharing feelings burdens others or makes them look weak, but these beliefs are dead wrong. Emotional connection is the glue that holds relationships together and the fuel that keeps them burning. She even suggests a George Costanza experiment for sharing feelings, doing the opposite of what you'd normally do to see if it brings harm or help. A big part of healing is self-care, which involves 4 major areas. 1. Learning to nurture yourself. This means putting yourself first, like on an airplane. Put your own oxygen mask on first before helping others. It involves learning to say no without guilt, asking for help combating that counter-dependence. Discovering your own likes and dislikes, which many neglected individuals struggle with, and prioritizing your own enjoyment. 2. Improving self-discipline. This is a big one, as many neglected adults struggle with procrastination, overindulgence, or finding it hard to make themselves do necessary tasks. Dr. Webb introduces the 3 things program daily. Do 3 things you don't want to do, or stop yourself from doing 3 things you shouldn't. This literally helps rewire your brain and build that inner self-regulating voice you might have missed out on. 3. Self-soothing. The ability to comfort yourself when uncomfortable emotions arise. This is learned from parents who model it. She provides a list of healthy self-soothing strategies, from taking a hot shower to practicing self-talk, which helps you calmly talk yourself through difficult feelings and keep perspective. 4. Having compassion for yourself. This is the pinnacle, the pyramid top of self-care. It means applying the golden rule in reverse: do unto yourself as you would do unto others. It's about becoming aware of self-directed anger and replacing it with the loving but firm inner voice that holds you accountable without judgment, helps you learn from mistakes, and allows you to forgive yourself and move on. Ultimately, it's about allowing yourself to be human, with all your flaws and strengths. And finally, if you're a parent, or plan to be, the book offers powerful guidance on ending the cycle. Dr. Webb reassures us that no matter what mistakes we've made, children are incredibly resilient, and positive changes in ourselves will trickle down to them. She helps you identify how your own emotional neglect might affect your parenting and how to proactively give your children what you never got. This involves providing them with high-octane emotional fuel, fostering mutual interdependence, reflecting a clear sense of self, teaching self-compassion, accepting and validating their emotions, and providing structure and clear consequences. Why does all this matter so much? Because Dr. Webb is convinced that many people live lives of quiet desperation, a quote from Henry David Thoreau, because they are wounded in childhood by this invisible force, unable to recognize or articulate what's wrong. This book provides the language, the framework, and the tools to finally see that elephant in the room. Dr. Webb's book is more than just a self-help guide, it's a call to self-awareness and healing. It encourages you to stop blaming yourself for what wasn't your fault, and instead to empower yourself to build the emotional foundation you deserve. If you've ever felt that subtle, unnamed emptiness, or wondered why you struggle with certain things despite having a good life, this book might just be the missing piece you've been looking for. It offers clarity, solace, and the strength to become a more connected, whole, and genuinely fulfilled version of yourself. And truly, that's one of the most heroic things you can ever accomplish.